Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. John Tyus. I'm the founder of the ID movement. We're so excited to have another conversation, part of this ongoing series called Emerging Leaders, live stream moments with the emerging leaders, to really help promote and also share stories and get insight from contributors from the brand new book, The ID Movement Presents Voices of the Sons, Letters from the Emerging Leaders. One of those emerging leaders is with us today, my dear brother, my dear friend, the great Pastor Elgin Orton. His middle name rather is so fly. It's Dupree. First of all, is Dupree. That's so cool, right? But it matches him. So Elgin Orton, the great pastor of the great church here in Columbus, Ohio, the City of Zion Church. So we're so excited to have him with us today. How you doing today?
Man of God, I'm doing great. So happy to be with you and, appreciate the invite.
Man, they call you. There's this going around thing here in Columbus where everybody calls you the best dressed preacher here in the city. So I don't know what be going on, man, but you got to give us some tips on these fashion for real.
Man, listen, I just try to fit in where I can.
Yeah, man.
Try to be original.
Man, you fitting right in, man. And the church is phenomenal. The church is killing. It's impactful. It's progressing in so many different ways. And from the outside looking in, I noticed that.
Yes,
and that's obviously a thumbs up to the leadership, which is you, man. And thank you for everything you're doing for our city here in Columbus, Ohio, for sure, brother.
And it's my pleasure. My pleasure. Could not do it without the team that we have at the city.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. So who is Elgin Orton? Talk to the people.
Who is Elgin Dupree
Yes,
Orton? Elgin is a young man that at a young age, accepted his call into the ministry. Had a very unique journey when I came into knowing who I am. Grew up in the church, all my life. I've always said that even though I grew up in the church, I was one that didn't really learn about, building a relationship with God until years later.
Yeah.
And so years later, I learned about developing that relationship, accepted my call in the ministry at the age of 7. Went through every challenge that every adolescent, can go through. A lot of those things I experienced in life molded me into the person that I am today. Started pastoring church. The city at that time was called Zion Hill Baptist Church. Started pastoring at the age of 28. And prior to pastoring, graduate of War Harvest Bible College, and started pastoring again at the age of 28. And here I am. This August will be 16 years. 16 years, man, that I would have been pastoring full time at that ministry. And it has been a at times rocky journey.
Yeah.
It has been a lifelong learning experience, but it's been rewarding at the same time.
That is phenomenal, man. 16 years.
16.
And that's a journey.
Yeah,
that's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah. So man, I'm grateful that you stuck in there, you keeping it going, brother, and you're an inspiration to us all. So I'm so excited that you're here, man, and you sticking it out, man. So you accepted the calling though at 7 years old.
Yeah.
7.
7 years old, man. I was a young buck is what they used to call us back then. And then it really actually called me Little Rev. So
yes. So when was the moment that you felt that you were called to do that?
I always admired my grandfather. And, when I would always watch my grandfather growing up as a child, I would sit on the second row on the side and watch him minister. And I admired him a lot. I admired his charisma. I admired his family value, everything you can think of. He was the first, if you want to say, spiritual voice outside of my parents that was very instrumental in grooming me, into who I am today. But at the age of 7, I still remember it like it was yesterday. I had a dream And in the dream, I can still remember I was under a tree and I could see hands, I can see a fishing rod, and I can see feet, but I can never see the face. And in the dream, the only thing I heard the voice said is, Elgin, would you preach my word? And I woke up and I remember it was really strange because I'm like, okay, what is the voice? What does it all this means? And I remember I told my mother about it. And she told me, she said, call your grandfather and share it with him. And so I shared it with him and he brought understanding to it that it was God, you know, bringing me into who I am, my calling, purpose, things of that nature. And I accepted my calling to the ministry at that age, at the age of 7. Still remember the first sermon I preached. It was on Noah.
It was on Noah? Talk to me
Noah.
about it.
Noah and Ark. I'm telling you, man.
It
I
was
was so
Noah's Ark.
little, man. They couldn't even see me over the podium. They had to get a stepping stool for me to step on for them to see me over the podium.
That's a movie, man. That's
right,
a movie.
Right.
That's a movie. That's great. So at 7, you accepted the call once you had the vision or the dream, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's pretty crazy. So what goes through the mind of a 7-year-old? Because I know what I was thinking when I was 7. Yeah. I just wanted to play the drums at church,
right?
And I wanted to run outside and chase squirrels. So what was the thought of somebody at 7 years old? You obviously were convinced.
Yeah, I was, man. My drive at the age of 7, because again, I always hung around older people. I still to this day, most of my crowd, you know, are people that are, you know, 5, 10, you know, sometimes 15 years older than me. Yeah. So I've always had, like they say, an old mindset. And so I thought a little different. I wasn't, you know, without any of the challenges that any other young person would go through. But it's just my mindset was completely different. And I went through, you know, a period of time where I just wanted to be a kid. I didn't want to do ministry. And I remember I asked my mother and I asked my grandfather, can I no longer do ministry? Can I just go and be a kid? Wow. And the only thing they told me is just go and pray about it. Man, these stories I still remember. And I prayed about it, and the clear as I heard the Lord told me no. Because there weren't a lot of kids around my time of growing up that were like so sold out for Christ. And, you know, trying to preach, you know, at the age of 7, you know, here I am 7, 8 years old, just in church and wearing suits and looking, you know, like an old Baptist
preacher.
Yeah, man, that was strange. You know what I mean? And so a lot of kids, you know, they would think I was like weird, you know, growing up. But again, my mindset was completely different. But I just really believe it was just, you know, the hand of God, you know, growing up as a young child. And I thank God for my parents and all of them. They helped create that kind of environment, you know, for me growing up.
Man, that is huge. That's huge. I understand how that feels because I was one to kind of stay the narrow path at a very, very young age. And it felt very lonely at times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there weren't a lot of people that were trying to do what I was trying to do. Not saying I didn't make mistakes because I made plenty, but I was trying my best to stay on that path. And there wasn't many trying their best to stay on that path. So I got you. And hanging around older people, I loved older people too.
Yes,
so you know, we never talked about this, but it sounds like we're more in common than I thought because I always hung around older people, even as a young person, because I love to glean wisdom from people that were older.
Right. Yep.
And I'm sure the same was for you, which is why you're so important to imparting to another generation the importance of wisdom. Because you've gleaned wisdom not only from what your experiences but others' experiences, which is what you talk about in the book. You talk about taking experiences from others. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny because I ministered on this on Sunday. And a message that I delivered Sunday, I'm trying to think what was the title. I said, the title was All My Life I've Had to Fight. And I dealt with the verse where it talks about how you have to war for the prophetic word that is over your life. When Paul told Timothy I think it's 1 Timothy. I talked about how there were 3 key individuals that played a significant role in my life growing up. Number 1 was my grandfather,
right,
Reverend James W. Mitchell, and after him it was Dr. Rob Parsley, obviously going through War Harvest Bible College, and after him it was my spiritual father, who was Apostle Brian Keith Williams. And all 3 of those individuals poured into my life either directly or indirectly. And they both helped develop areas in my spiritual maturity. For instance, my grandfather, which was very strange, Baptist preacher, he brought me into the understanding of deliverance. That was unheard of back in those days. Baptist folk didn't lay hands and deliver people, cast out devils and all that. No, my grandfather back, man, in the 80s, that's what he was doing that. People would come there. I still can remember him casting devils out of people. So I was open to deliverance ministry under my grandfather, Rob Parsley. I mean, it was a variety of different things, of ministries, that he exposed me to as far as going through the Bible college. But when I went to and set up on Apostle Brian K. Williams, it was more so bringing me into the understanding of the apostolic and prophetic. So each one, imparted into me, and a lot of what they've imparted, I've honestly have put those in practice into what I do now, at the City of Zion.
That is crazy. So you mentioned your grandfather, Reverend Williams, right?
Yes.
And you mentioned Bishop Brian Keith Williams, and the great Dr. Rod Parsley as well. That is some amazing people to glean from.
Yes, sir.
That's some good gumbo right there, right? that's some good gumbo, right? So that's good stuff to glean from, because they're all different perspectives. I'm sure I never got the opportunity to meet your grandfather, but even the heavy deliverance ministry, which I come from, which I'm a part of, casting out devils, hearing different voices out of people, and staying late at night, tarrying on the altar with people, and
yes, sir.
I get that, and then I also get the leadership and the worship that Bishop Williams was heavy in, and prophetic was very heavy on him.
Absolutely.
And he's actually wrote on the back of this book. He's a supporter of the book as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. So he tries to push everything that we doing over here. So that's one person that I feel is still trying to bridge the gap between generations.
Absolutely.
And Pastor Parsley, I mean, come on now. I mean, it's Pastor Parsley. You know what I'm saying? So what were some of the key things that you've learned from all three of those?
Yeah. Again, just, going back to my grandfather, again, dealing with deliverance ministry, building that foundation of knowing who Christ is. Because you're a Baptist, if you ain't preaching Christ, you ain't preaching.
Right.
What I mean?
Right.
So, a lot of the foundation of who Christ is, and from there, developing that relationship, as the more that I got serious about listening to the teachings of what he would teach. At that age, when my grandfather was pastor, man, I would be one of the youngest ones that would be attending all night prayer they would be having, the Bible study that they would be having, man, because I was just like a sponge. I was just wanting to glean everything, that they were pouring. And so again, going over to Rob Parsley, it was just, when you went to the Bible college, again, there was on leadership, there was on pastoral studies. The list goes on, what I mean, when it was at the Bible college. And then with Brian Keith Williams, he also had a ministerial school. It was called the Young Preachers Institute. So it was additional training that it was me, and it was actually, I think it was like close to 200 preachers that actually sat through his leadership school. Excuse me, not leadership school, but his preacher's school. And he taught us on how to develop and write sermons, how to flow in the prophetic. Definitely, worship is pretty much like the thrust of all nations. Then that was their landmark, man. So he exposed that meant all nations was by far one of the greatest experiences that I've had in my life in terms of taking my understanding of God and the prophetic and the moves of God, the glory, all that kind of stuff. When I set up on the Brian Keith Williams, I'm forever indebted to what he's imparted in my life.
Yeah, he was heavy, and he still is heavy, just on
still to this day,
tapping into the worship, that aspect, and how that worship opens up so much for you to move freely in the spirit, and allowing the glory to come in, right? He loves some strings, right? Love them strings. You better be on them strings,
bro. That opens up heaven. You gotta bring it, man.
Come on, man. That's powerful, man. That is awesome. You mentioned something in your letter in the book. You mentioned something about your grandfather, and it was something that we talked briefly about before we jumped on the live. And you mentioned about him saying, I'll let you share. What did he tell you to make sure you do as a preacher?
Yeah. One of the things my grandfather always taught is that as a young preacher, or just a preacher in general,
Yeah.
you have to always be ready at any given moment. And he taught us that a preacher should always have a sermon ready, either in his back pocket or in his Bible. And I remember the time that I was actually put to the test. You know, at a young age, you know, you try to think that you have all the time in the world. Never would think that he would call on me, you know, to actually preach. If the church had went to fellowship with another ministry. Around that time, my grandmother had suffered a heart attack, and he had to leave the service and obviously rush to the hospital. I was the only associate minister that would happen to be there at that service. So I knew then, okay, he's really going to call me to preach at the service. And I'm telling you, man, I was so nervous, but I wasn't prepared. You know what I mean? Because he trained us that way. And so I had to take a few moments and go into pastoral study. And I think I probably around that time, I was probably maybe about 10, maybe 12 or so like that.
Wow.
Yeah, I was young, man. And I had to go and try to piece a message together. And I went up there and I fumbled. I'm telling you, I fumbled. I was all over the place.
Man.
God, I said, Lord, forgive me after this. I mean, I can't even tell you what I said. And I think I was, in those days, I used to preach for 5 minutes, if that much. You know what I mean? So I got done and finished it and fumbled, but it taught me a valuable lesson, man, to always be prepared, you know, at any given moment, you know, so you got to hide the word in your heart. So it taught me from that moment forward, I vowed to never get to be caught off guard if ever called on to minister.
Man, I love that you shared that, because that's something that my mother, Pastor Teresa Tyus, has shared with us in leadership all of our lives. My grandfather, we come from a Kojic background. So my grandfather was superintendent of Church and God in Christ on the Ohio Cleveland district, or some district over there. And so it passed, all that passed down to us. And make sure you got a sermon in your back pocket, which he told me. Because at any minute, they said, be ready in and out of season. So,
absolutely.
Because never know, any type of moment we can call you to preach. You go visit the church and say, hey, how you doing? I'm just coming to support you. And they call you up to preach, and right then and there, you better have something. So,
and I train our ministers at our house the same way. I tell them all the time, you never know. You know what I mean? When I'll call on you, you don't know, anything can happen. But you have to be ready at any given moment to call on to be ready to minister.
Man, that is huge. That is so in your letter, and I know we're running out of time here, man. I can talk to you all day. I literally can't.
Right.
But in your letter, you talk heavy about mentorship and why it's so important to connect to people that have wisdom, and that only can pour and impart into you, but you also have the ability to hear and listen. And you talk about the difference between hearing and the difference between listening, and that some people can hear, but everybody can't truly listen. It's a verb, is what you described it as. That was great. Could you share a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a broad byproduct of mentorship.
Yeah.
You know, having someone to pour back into me. Again, as the 3 individuals that mentored me, I allowed myself, well, let me not say I allowed myself, but they opened themselves up to me. You know, to a certain extent, because, you know, when somebody is becoming a mentor, it's about them touring their life, you know. And so to some extent, you know, their lives were on display, and it taught me valuable lessons. I was allowed to see the, you know, human side of ministry gifts, as well as the spiritual side. And it taught me about it taught me about a good balance that we as ministers and people in fivefold ministry, you know, we must have. But mentoring is really, like, as we're experiencing right now, a changing of the guards. Huge. And it's just not in our city, but it's all
around the world.
Everybody, we're seeing there's this great shift that is taking place. But, and I like the book that Jake's just released.
The mic.
Don't drop the mic.
Yep.
And he's dealing with that whole transition.
Yep.
And I think it's very valuable that we, as the younger generation, or the generation that is getting ready to take on that next, you know, level or that mantle, that we glean from them. You know, and that we allow them to pour into us and allow them not to approach it where like we know everything, but allow again ourselves, first of all, humble ourselves to listen to some of the things that are the nuggets that they are dropping. Because again, there's a lot of mistakes that could be avoided if we listen, you know, to what they're actually, we hear it, but are we really listening to what they actually are saying? And then there's a lot of things that we could avoid. And then, I mean, there's granted, God is doing some new things, but there's nothing new under the sun.
Nothing.
There are things they've experienced that will help us or this next generation take the body of Christ to where it needs to go. So mentoring is extremely important, not just only in ministry, just in life in general.
Yeah, no,
you know what I'm saying?
I love what you said, man, because that is where my heart has been for these past 4 to 5 years. And I met with the ID Movement's board about 4 years ago. We were staging our first event, a conversation with the fathers. And I told them that I felt a heavy burden in my heart to have conversations with these men because transition was about to happen over the next 5 years in every area of life. And it's not a normal just transition of somebody just taking over a church or somebody taking over a business. It's a worldwide shift that's taking place, like a new era is beginning. And I wanted to capture their stories, capture their hearts, because I didn't want them to leave, whether it was retiring or passing away, without us really getting a chance to hear their hearts, have conversation and exchange and dialogue with them. So you right on it, man. I totally agree with what you're saying. That's great. And so I'm just going to ask you I'm just going to throw some names out there, and I just want you to tell me the first thing that comes to mind. Okay. See, I didn't tell you about that one, right?
Right.
All right. Reverend Williams.
Prolific.
Elgin Orton.
Underdog.
Wow. Okay, I ain't gonna ask no questions. Okay. I feel you, man. I feel you. I'm leaving alone. That's off. Maybe that's off a topic off time. We'll talk about that. Pastor Parsley.
Wow. Pastor Parsley. I can say bold.
Bold. Yes, sir. Bishop Williams.
Compassionate.
The City of Zion Church.
Davidic.
Michael Jordan.
Trailblazer.
Mentorship.
You said, what do I think when I hear the word mentorship?
Yes, sir.
Only thing much needed.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Baby boomer.
Valuable.
Millennials.
Ooh, the millennials. Different.
Zers.
I don't know why the first word that came to mind was foundationalist.
Really? Wow. That's powerful. Okay. Elgin Orton.
Authentic.
My man. Thank you so much, Pastor, for this opportunity to share, man. It's been awesome. Hey, y'all, those of you that are watching, make sure you hit that share button, hit the like button, comment. We got to keep this algorithm going because Facebook and YouTube be acting crazy. So I need y'all help. So if y'all don't mind sharing, Make sure you subscribe, because we're going to have conversations probably every week with just different contributors of the book. Make sure y'all go get the book, Voices of the Sons.
Great,
Letters
great.
from the Emerging Leaders, Columbus edition. And we say Columbus edition because we're going to have other editions. God bless you, Pastor Orton.
Thank you for the invite. It's been my pleasure.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir. Thank you so much. Hey, y'all. Thank you for tuning in. Share, like, and comment. Make sure y'all follow Pastor Orton, and we will connect soon. God bless y'all.
Absolutely.